going on, everybody? Thanks for joining us today at Let's Chat. So we've got some people on Zoom and also here at the office. Today, we're talking about property management. So we're going to talk a little bit about managing your single-family rental properties and also your Airbnb. So we've got Brandon King here with us with DK Property Management, and he's going to talk to us about what his company does and just some of the benefits that he brings to his investors. So Brandon, just give us an overview of your company and just a little bit about what you guys do.
Yeah, so basically full service, long-term property management. We really try to see ourselves as part of your retirement planning mechanism. So we do a lot to make sure that, we try to improve stability of your cash flows, try to maintain the value of your asset, and find a good tenant-landlord balance. That's a very big part of who we are. So we are, we manage 330 units over Hamilton County, Catoosa County, and Walker County. We're actually looking to go south a little bit, but mostly single family. Well, about 50% single family homes, about 30% plexes and that sort of thing, and then the rest are larger unit count type complexes.
Yeah, so you mentioned the tenant-client relationship, having a balance between your investor and your tenants, and I know that that's can be a struggle to do that. So what do you do to maintain that and to make sure that everybody's happy?
Well, you never do that last part. But the main thing is we've actually started incentivizing our owners to do more thorough repair jobs, or allowing us to do more thorough repair jobs. So that's helped tremendously.
Mm-hmm.
The way we do that is if you bring us a property that, say it's a B-class property, the air conditioner's a little older, the roof's a little older, we actually will give you a better rate if you will make sure that those things stay up to date and up to speed, the better management rate. And so that alone has actually helped incentivize people to take better care of their properties, or allow us to take better care of their properties. At the end of the day, we work for our clients, and so if they say, no, you can't spend $5,000 on a new roof, well, guess what? I'm patching the roof again,
Mm-hmm.
which I'll be doing again in 8 months. That doesn't build a good client-tenant relationship. A very important part of it is consistent lease enforcement. Oh my goodness. I cannot tell you how many properties I get that they haven't paid rent in 3 months, 4 months, 5 months. We're like, okay, well, we send out a notice, and in Georgia at least, rent's due on the 1st, they're out by the 30th. 90+% of the time. We don't even file until the 11th. So 11th is a busy day for us. We don't do a ton, but we probably file 5 to 15 a month. Most of them pay out, but they know where we stand. They know where we stand, and they know how exactly how it plays out. There's no guesswork, there's no finagling, and we also do quarterly inspections, which are huge in terms of catching things before they become 3-year-long problems, which allows the tenants to get the feedback that, hey, this isn't acceptable, way before it's a detriment to the property. It also helps us to find things like pets and smoking and things that aren't necessarily need to be notified and need to be fully aware by everybody in the situation. So really we do it through a lot of data and research and proper planning.
Yeah, and that's what I've noticed just about your company is that you guys are very you're very data oriented. I mean, I would really just kind of say, for lack of better terms, that you're really kind of a data nerd. You guys, you send out your newsletter, which has tons of information about the market and just information about properties that are selling, what are properties renting for, and just kind of like your take on what's going on in the market. And I don't know of any other property management company that does that. So the newsletter is a big thing. Elaborate on that a little bit more if you don't mind.
The newsletter? Or?
Yeah, newsletter.
Yeah. So when it comes to data, New York City has tons of it. Atlanta has a lot of it.
Mm-hmm.
Los Angeles has a lot of it. When I tried to find stuff on Chattanooga,
it's tough. I know. I've had the same problem.
It's incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
And so I basically said, well, if nobody else is going to do it, I will. So every month, usually the second or third of the month, most of the time, I'm able to send out a lot of the fresh data that comes out from either the MLS or from our rental data. Zillow, I pull from all types of sources, even the Fed and places like that for the macroeconomic factors. But it's really targeted towards Chattanooga-based investors. Not that you have to live in Chattanooga, but that you have an interest in the greater Chattanooga real estate market. So one of the things, like I said, we manage 330 rental properties. There's a lot of data just in those 330 that Zillow doesn't have, that the MLS may not even have.
Sure.
And so we're able to use that, and we have every time somebody comes to our website looking for a property, we will ask them to fill out a survey, or ask them their email address, and so we'll ask them every so often to send us a survey, and that data gets put into the newsletter. It's literal survey data from tenants in our area that have been either shopping or are shopping currently on our market for different things. Sometimes they want a 1-bedroom, 1-bath for $1,000. Sometimes they want a 4-bedroom, 3-bath for $1,000. But either way, we know what they're looking for, and I share that information freely because, well, I believe in freedom of information, freedom of expression. So.
Yeah, and your internal numbers. I mean, that's a big thing because you manage quite a few properties, so that tells you. I mean, that's I guess in a way kind of a microcosm of the market, just with the properties that you manage. So
Yeah.
so let's talk a little bit more about some of your other tools. So like the stuff that you guys have, the resources, the newsletter like we mentioned. You keep up with the data, the information. What about the the one thing I wanted to talk about was the rent calculator. I mean, that's a really handy tool, on your website, because like when I go and look at stuff, and I'm selling properties to investors all the time, and I always want to try to find out what is the what is something going to rent for, like especially if it's vacant and there's no rental history or not anything we can get a hold of. I want to be able to find that out. And like you said, like in Chattanooga, it's not like Atlanta or Nashville or some of these bigger markets where there are rental comps on the MLS. Like here, there's so few properties that sell on the MLS, and it's just hard to get that information. So your rental, or your calculator on your website's a really cool tool. So how did you come up with that, and what do you see is what can investors expect in terms of like using that information?
Yeah, absolutely. So I decided to build that calculator. The 5th request I got from a realtor that day for a rent analysis on a property. I said, you know what? This can be done differently and better, and basically at your own leisure. I noticed also a lot of management companies or rental places will have a place where you can get a custom rent analysis. So you send them an address and a property, which is great for lead generation, and I respect it. But for me specifically, I said, you know what? If I provide value, they still won't be able to manage it and do that the way we can. So I don't worry about that side. What you can expect from it is an analytical model built off of regression analysis, which is a very fancy way to say data nerd, to your point. But it is data driven. It is based, a lot of our internal data comes through that, but it helps you see, the 3 counties that we manage. You pick which one you're in, which has a statistical impact. You pick bedrooms, bathrooms, even the square footage, how it relates to other similar 3-bedroom, 2-bath properties like this, because there's a big difference in an 1,800 square foot 3-2 and a 1,100 square foot 3-2. Mm-hmm. Those things can make a big difference. And if I tell you that I think it's 1,100 to 1,200 and you've got half the square footage of what I had in my head, that's a big deal. And then one of the things, that gives you kind of a basis. So once you kind of put the basics in there, the type of area that it is, the bedroom count, bathroom, square footage, how the neighborhood is, and an aggregate, gives you a basic. If it's A, B, C, or D class properties, here's the ranges you're looking at.
Yeah.
And then that gives you enough to kind of run and get going if you're in the hot buying season like we have been in for the last 2 years. But then you bought it. The next section of that calculator actually says, okay, what can it be? Like here's the range, but what if you do this, if you do that, what are you looking at? So I want to put granite countertops. There's actually an argument in some situations to put granite countertops in a rental property. Growing up, I always heard, because I grew up in real estate, You never put granite, you never do this, you never do that. And I was like, do you know how much it is now? It's like $2,000. I can do this whole kitchen, and the statistical impact to rent is around $30-$40 in this for this type of house in this type of area. And using the 1% rule as a quick proxy, that's a great ROI. Not to mention it lasts forever. So, but in certain markets it doesn't. There's no added value because you're already hitting the top of the rent comps. And so that tool helps you also then kind of flush out what kind of rehab do I want to do, and how much do I want to do.
Yeah, and so that's that's the thing that that I noticed when I looked at it was just that it incorporates like all those other things. Like if you just look on like there's rentalmeter.com, and I use that on a fairly regular basis just as a quick snapshot of what something would rent out for, and it actually has been surprisingly accurate. But on your rental calculator, I mean, you're saying that you can just add in like basically what are the level of finishes you're going to put into this house, and how's that going to impact the price? What is the square footage and all of that. The stuff that you're not going to find on really any other site that I'm aware of in terms of just giving you a really good solid number in terms of what it should rent out for. So I think that's a really important tool to use.
One of the big things, a lot of people will ask me, they're like, oh, 3.2s rent for $1,400 or whatever.
That's what I'm saying.
They're like, so I've got a 2-bedroom, 1.5 bath. Should I do that? And I was like, well, yeah, but maybe. Excuse me. But if you take a 2-bedroom, 1.5 bath that's 900 square feet and you turn it into a 3.2, a 900 square foot 3.2 doesn't have the same appeal.
Yeah.
And so that's what that calculator actually helps you put numbers to it, and I love that part of it.
Yeah, that's awesome. So just with some of the things we've talked about here, what would you say would be the primary thing that that your company stands out with, or what sets you apart from say other property management companies? I mean, just like the main thing that you could think of. Because we talked about several things right now. So consistency. Okay, so tell us about that.
Excuse me. When we were trying to decide a couple years ago, or yet last year when I bought the company, and even a couple years before that when I started trying to re-engineer it, what do we want to look like? And I looked at companies and I said, okay, well, let's start and see what kind of companies have grown leaps and bounds in their industry, right? And then I tried to find companies that were similar to ours. So what is property management? What is real estate? It's a two-sided marketplace, right? You got buyers and sellers. You got landlords and tenants. And I looked at it, and basically I came to the conclusion that Amazon was the closest major company that I could try to pattern myself after. Well, what does Amazon do? Well, they have a bunch of sellers, and they have a lot of buyers, and what do? How long does it take to get a package from Amazon? 2 days. Unless you pay for extra service and then you get it one day, but they're consistent. And if they don't provide what they promised you, all you got to do is call them, and a lot of times they'll just take the charge off.
Yeah, that's true.
And so they're consistent, and they're consistent, and then you throw in a level of customer service that's above average for anything in the online sales world. And anytime, the one thing I loved about Amazon is whenever they've got too much stuff, they can market to find more buyers. When they've got too many buyers and not enough stuff, they can market to find more properties or products in their case. And so just a constant being able to go back and forth, but consistency is what gives you the ability to grow a property management portfolio beyond 1, 5, or even 10, or even 100 properties.
Yeah, so that sounds like a really smart move. Taking your strategy from Amazon's playbook. Now if you send the rocket out in space that says DK Property Management on it soon, I really will be impressed.
Next year.
Okay,
Yeah.
That's the plan. Next year, guys. So let's just talk about a few more things that that I think that a lot of investors think about when they're buying or selling rental properties, buying rental properties, and then they want a property manager. So let's say somebody buys some properties. Like right now, I'm selling a 17 property package deal. Okay, so like it's all rented out except one unit. So just in that situation, you're buying something that's occupied. I mean, what's a way to transition over as the new investor and also hiring a new property management company?
So I'm going to assume for a second I work for the buyer in this case.
Yeah.
So because the buyer is the one with the lack of information in this situation.
Mhm.
The seller knows everything, the buyer knows nothing.
Yeah.
We've actually found a lot of value because in estoppel certificates, they are basically a questionnaire that goes to the tenant that says, what's all this information? Now, historically, they've always been using commercial, but tenants, as soon as they find out the property's being sold, antennas go up, hairs get raised, and they're interested. You have their attention. The sellers actually we've found that sellers do well to pass on a better product whenever they say, hey, the new buyer wants to know who you are, they want to know your information, they want to know how much is your rent, that sort of a thing. It does a couple of things. It actually gives them a little bit of ease, especially we tie it with our letter, the welcome letter. Hey, we're going to be the ones taking over, here's what we're doing, here's our basic rules, but everything in your lease is still your lease. That's been huge, and I heavily encourage it. Any of our clients that we bring on, we give them a copy of ours because it's designed for our internal processes. The other things, make sure you have it in the contract. Get all the security deposits and prorated rents. I learned last year of a cool clause that says, pay all the prorated rents as if they were paid. Because we were trying to figure out between a buyer and a seller, like, well, they paid half the rent, and who owns this, and who owns that. Effectively, the way that we've always treated it since I learned this new method is the day of closing, every debt that was due before that still belongs to the prior owner, because they are going to pay you the proceeds for everything after. And they're going to pay it as if it was paid up to date.
So in other words, if there's some tenants that are late, just go ahead and assume that it's already been paid, and you prorate it based on
What should have been.
What should have been done. Okay.
Right.
Okay. That makes sense.
And it keeps it cleaner, simpler, and closing can happen without anybody having to do math.
Yeah, and I was actually trying to figure that out on my deal I'm working on too, so I appreciate that, Brandon.
I'm here to help.
Good. And so I also want to talk a little bit about just our our area, the markets that we focus on, or specifically Chattanooga and North Georgia. And I think a lot of times people kind of just like merge those together, and I kind of do that myself because it's still, I mean, there's a lot of similarities, but what do you think in terms of like just the differences when you're looking at just Chattanooga and you kind of get over to North Georgia, Walker County, Catoosa, all of that? What would you say would be some of the main differences there?
Well, in the rental space, a big thing is the difference in evictions, the rules and laws and everything that goes around evictions and tenancy. In Tennessee, somebody doesn't pay the rent by the first, you maybe have them out in 2 months, month and a half, maybe 3 if they really are good at knowing the system, because there's multiple steps, especially in Hamilton County. In Georgia, however, it's about a 2-week process to file and then finalize an eviction to set out. That makes a big difference in your risk calculations.
Sure.
Outside of that, the other thing, so it's a two-edged sword, there's a state income tax in Georgia. So you will also have, in general, especially on the state line, fewer high income properties. So fewer A class, let's say, or A plus. We don't have a lot that I've ever seen, a lot of $2,500 rentals, whereas there's a few dozen in Chattanooga, because, well, for one, there's hospitals and some pretty high-end employment on this side of the state line. But if it's within commuting distance to Georgia, but why would somebody that would rent a $2,500 house not want to live on the Georgia side?
Yeah.
Well, 6% income tax.
Yep.
However, in terms of kind of your B-class properties, these are going to be, your $1,500 a month rentals, let's say, maybe $1,200 to $1,500. The school zones in comparable rental amounts are better on average. So a lot of times, and that's where we get a lot of value, and where a lot of tenants will come to us and say, hey, I need a place in Catoosa County. Catoosa County specifically, in most cases, is the ones, if they're coming for a school zone, they want to go to Catoosa County. So school zones are a big deal. Income tax, evictions, those are probably the main 3.
Yeah, and so a lot of that is simply just going across the state line too. The differences there, so That makes sense, but it seems like to me though, in terms of like price points, like like the property values and stuff like that. I mean, it seems like there's more similarities there in terms of like your, like what properties are selling for, in certain neighborhoods, like median price neighborhoods in North Georgia versus Chattanooga. It seems like there's quite a bit of similarity there. Would you think so?
It's almost mirroring the rental market
Okay.
for the buying and sell side.
Yeah.
Is if you're in that $150,000 to $250,000 range, there's a lot of similarities in what you'll get on either side.
I gotcha.
But when you're talking about the high end, you're gonna have more difficulty in Georgia.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So just kind of just looking at the way that the rental market is right now, and just the real estate market, just specifically for Chattanooga and our area. I mean, what do you see like? Well, first of all, like how do you think the market has changed this year? If any, or do you think it stayed the same, or just what are your thoughts about this year? And then also, what do you see like coming up, in the near future next year?
So this last year has definitely been the story of cheap and plentiful money. Everyone was given a lot of direct money, and the way that the money multiplier effect works, basically that money's flowed through the economy. The savings rate has gone up in theory, but there's just a lot of money dumped in the economy, and the money can change hands a dozen times in a month, in theory. Usually doesn't, but that's what we're seeing now. And where a lot of this inflation is coming from is twofold, in my opinion. A large infusion of cash, the M1, M2 money supply has gone up dramatically in the last year. And when you have the same amount, or when you have more money, dollar bills, chasing a fewer number of goods, that's a supply and demand problem, specifically for money and whatever it is you're trying to purchase. And so that's going to decrease the value of money and increase the value, relatively speaking, of the product. Well, you throw 95% leverage on it, the way that loans can happen, especially in single family owner-occupieds, and a $1 increase here has a 20-fold impact over here. And so that's why we've seen such an incredible velocity in real estate pricing. I have noticed that we've actually been selling, the inventory's been much lighter, right? There's been much less inventory. That's not news. We've actually been selling, the throughput has been comparable, which has been crazy. Even though there's a lot fewer houses on the market at any given time, there's still the same number of buyer and sell transactions that are happening. Some more, some less, but in the aggregate. And so the prices, what happens is you've got, what that tells me is when somebody needs something, like a house, they're just going to go and pick the best option that is available, depending on their time horizon and that sort of thing. And people are still needing. There's not been a change in the need. And so effectively what's happened is people just haven't been willing to sell.
Yeah.
Which has been more of the impact.
Yeah.
But that's what I've been seeing, and I felt a little bit of a slowing the last year, and it's very sporadic. So right after the stimulus, the most recent stimulus, one of the larger ones, came out, the rental demand was just, how much is a security deposit? About a stimulus payment. And so if they're unhappy where they live, they now have $1,200 or $2,400 or whatever to come and try to upgrade their life or change where they're living. We saw a lot of that, transplants from California, New York, et cetera, Illinois. But then you noticed a palpable slowing of that. What normally would have been a very hot time was still hot. It just wasn't as hot as March, which is usually a mediocre time. Once the kind of this multiplier effect kind of slows down in the money supply. As of late, I think we've actually, so we had a bit of a lull, which is almost seasonal in August, September.
Yeah.
A lot of that's seasonal with schools going back into place and things of that nature. People's lives kind of need a steady point. But the jobs and the employment and the income and that sort of thing is, I think, have helped us kind of push back up to where inventory increased for during that period a little bit.
Yeah, it was a little.
Yeah,
Yeah.
nothing to write home about. But it was enough to contrast the heroin high of tight inventory we had, and so it was noticeable. That wouldn't have been noticeable 2 years ago. The jobs and the income and the average wage increases have really, I think, helped kind of bring it all back to where it almost feels back during the stimulus. And so that's what I've seen right now.
Okay.
In terms of looking forward,
I know nobody knows.
Nobody knows,
You've got a good educated opinion. I've got my opinion, but I want to hear what you're thinking.
I think realistically, I'm watching how much money gets kicked out of the Federal Reserve and through the banking system and the prices on mortgages. Because right now, 1% increase in the mortgage rate would be a 30%, 40% increase. That's tremendous.
Mm-hmm.
And so it becomes harder and harder for them to do tiny touches because a fraction becomes a much bigger piece of the pie.
Yeah.
I do see some increased volatility in the markets coming because of that. But every time I hear somebody say, "Oh, new stimulus payment," or this type of thing's going on, or this new program, I remain bullish. When I stop hearing that, I'm going to be worried.
Okay, that makes sense. And I think it's really, with the interest rate, it's interesting because right now you got all this inflation that's hitting, and who knows how long it's going to last. It may keep going, who knows. But with the inflation, that's obviously a problem. And then if they raise the interest rate to kind of counter the inflation, well, that's another problem. Like you're saying, it's a very interesting spot that we're in right now.
I think with the current climate, what I expect to see is an increase in the tax rates. That's another mechanism by which to pull in
It
money.
always goes back to that, yeah.
And unfortunately, that's kind of what they've already started preaching.
Yeah.
Is we're going to raise it on the rich, right?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, rich is defined by whoever, and
And the richest people pay no taxes, or at least not like income tax.
Right. So, unfortunately, in lieu of getting into political debate, conceptually, though, fundamentally, even monetary policy says if you have a heavy inflation going on, you need to pull some excess cash out of the system, and that's one of the mechanisms by which to do it.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. All right. Good stuff, Brandon. I definitely appreciate that. Do you guys have any questions for Brandon before we transition over to Grace?
So did you create your calculator?
I did. I built it myself.
Oh my God, you are a nerd.
Luckily, and I learned this in building it, there are cool little tools that basically does the fascia of it. And I just had to put all the back end data and make all the calculations jive the way that it works in the my Excel calculator that I built for it. But yes, it was
So where
very
can you
nerdy.
find it?
DKpropertymanagement.com. It's a great point. On our website, if you go to the owners drop down, it'll be, I think, the last one. It says rent review. You get on there, play to your heart's content. It will give you an answer without you having to put in your email. But if you are so inclined, you are also welcome to put in your email, and it will send you a copy, and it will send me a copy, and so we can look at getting you, full management services.
Yeah.
My favorite thing is when somebody says, your rent calculator's broken. It said it was going to be $200 more than I actually got. So that's because we didn't do it. It could have been more because we have a tremendous marketing component to our services. So, great
Good
question.
stuff.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah. Anything else?
Right.
All right. Appreciate it, Brandon.
Absolutely.
So if you guys want to get a hold of Brandon, dkpropertymanagement.com.
That's right.
Okay, so our next half is short-term rentals. We have with us Joe Riley, who is a phenomenal short-term property management company. They're all over the country. And so, Joe, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I'm originally from a little town called Etowah, just north of here, and was in the Army for a long time, and on a deployment to Afghanistan. My wife traveled Monday through Friday for work, so we threw our house up on Airbnb and HomeAway while I was deployed. Realized there was a big need for this around military bases, and so when we came back, we started getting more and converted some of our long-term rentals over to short-term rentals, and kind of grew from there. And now we're located in Tennessee, Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, Florida, Texas, Pennsylvania, Indiana, Mississippi. So basically, if you kind of draw a line from Pennsylvania down to Texas, and most of the stuff that falls below that. That's where
So
we're located.
east of the Mississippi River?
Yes.
No, except for Texas.
Not well, no, yeah, right. We have gone west of the Mississippi, and we're not, we're not all the way up in Illinois and some of the
Right.
other things that are, a little bit Ohio. We're not there yet. So
But primarily you focused around military bases.
yeah, so we started around all military bases. We've since branched out from that. We just bought a timeshare property that went into bankruptcy up in Gatlinburg, Pigeon Forge, and we're in a lot of vacation markets and stuff now, and a lot of non-military kind of urban areas.
So you just recently came into Chattanooga.
Yeah.
And so what is your favorite short-term rental community right now?
The favorite place?
Yeah.
Savannah has done really well for us. Savannah is a great vacation market, but also has a large military community. So it kind of ticks all our boxes.
So you like
Birmingham's
having
great too.
you like having short-term in military-based communities, and what's the biggest reason for that?
So at the end of the day, what we're looking for is what we call cheap real estate markets with a lot of churn. Because if you're looking for short-term rentals, you're looking for people who need temporary furnished accommodations. So that can be a vacation market. The problem is a lot of vacation markets aren't cheap. Military towns, people leave, turnover every 18 months or so, like what my wife and I moved 8 times in 7 years. And so, but you have oftentimes around military bases fairly cheap real estate. Other areas, university towns, college towns, those tend to be good spots. And then kind of lower cost of vacation markets. So if you go down to the Florida, we're more in the kind of Pensacola market, not the Destin market. If you're in, Gatlinburg, Pigeon Forge, we're, kind of more in some of the older properties that we're going in and rehabbing and that sort of thing.
So short-term rental, what is your average time frame on a short-term rental for those that you manage that you see?
Yeah, so we really have 2 types of properties. One that cater more towards kind of traditional week-long stay, weekend stay, people traveling for vacation. And then we do a lot of workforce housing. We do a lot of insurance housing for people who've been displaced. The insurance company has to put them up. So it's kind of a bimodal population distribution with on your short-term side of, true short-term side of things, a little over 3 days would kind of be the average stay. And then on more your workforce housing, you're probably looking at the 12-day stay.
Okay.
Horizon.
Most of those all furnished.
Yes, everything we do is furnished, fully furnished. Yeah.
And so how do you furnish them?
So we have a range of different ways. We work with, there's actually another company that has some military spouses that also travel around it. And most all of our employees are veterans and military spouses, and most of our partners in the local markets where we operate are veteran-owned companies as well. But in terms of how we furnish them, we have, again, a partner that we can do it externally. It's a third party with. But then we have our own warehouses here in East Tennessee, and so we kind of bring things in on the transfer truckloads and have it in our warehouses, and then we push it out from there. And then how we push out, sometimes we use brokered freight. We have got our own trucks and trailers and stuff that we run, and then we've got a bunch of mobile setup crews that kind of just travel around the country, launching new properties for us.
So what do you think is the sweet spot in terms of nightly rate?
Oh, that all depends on. That depends on the property. It depends on the market. We have houses that the average nightly rate will be $400 or $500. We have houses that the average nightly rate's $90, $100. Across our whole portfolio, our ADR, our RevPAR, not ADR, but our RevPAR. So RevPAR would be your average daily rate times your occupancy occupancy would be about a little over $150 a night for RevPAR, so about $4,500 a month.
Which is great.
Yeah. So our other metric is we don't want to buy a property that doesn't. And so, and then in terms of what we do, we have three types of properties in our portfolio. We have those that we own, either directly through us or through one of our affiliated holding companies that we've launched. Then when I initially started the business and I would run out of capital, we started running a rental arbitrage business where we would come in and sign a 3 or 5 year lease and then turn around and sublease in an arbitrage. And then from that, landlords started approaching to us and said, how are you paying our rent and making money on top of that? So why don't we just pay you a management fee and then we'll manage? So that then launched the management company. And now the management company, we do still definitely work with individual property owners or people who have a smaller portfolio, but increasingly we're working a lot with institutional players who want to get exposure to the space. And so, you know, to kind of play in that game, it's around a minimum of about 6 million or so equity check size for us to then kind of onboard those folks. And, you know, we've got debt partners that will go across the country, provide non-recourse loans on the debt side. We've got insurance, we can line them up with an insurance company. Our legal team gets all their infrastructure put in place. So that's kind of where we've tracked off. We tell people we're the Walmart of short-term rentals. So, you know, we're not the Saks Fifth Avenue approach. So, you know, and by that what we mean is, you know, we take, you know, a couple $100,000 properties and go and run them as short-term rentals, whereas a lot of our competitors don't want to do anything that's not $1 million beach home or mountain home. And so the metric for us is we want a minimum of 2% of the asset value in monthly revenue, or about 25% a year. So a $100,000 house, we want to generate at least $25,000 a year. $200,000 house, we want $50,000 a year.
Well, that makes sense. So somebody, you know, there's a lot of people out there that have been in long-term rentals and they're like, you know, I think I really want to get into the short-term rental market. What would be the top 5 things that you would tell them to definitely not do?
Not do. So you have to completely adjust your mindset, right? It is not the same business model. And you have to change how you think about the asset from just being a piece of real estate to a business, because that's really what you're doing is you're banking on the cash flow that's coming off that. And you might see in a rental property you're going off cash flow, which is true. And if you just got 1 or 2 properties, it's maybe not dramatically different, but when you start trying to do it at scale, the systems and processes and everything else that you have to put in place, you know, you go from turning, you know, maybe a long-term rental, you turn, you know, once a year would be a heavy turnover. Hopefully you don't even have to turn it, you know, more than once every 2 or 3 years. You know, for us, we're turning on average 5-6 times a month. So, you know, you go from turning once a year to, you know, 40, 50, 60 times a year. And then you're going from not only having to maintain core systems, your HVAC, roof, and all the other things, to also having to keep up with furniture, sheets, linens, towels, cookware, spices, TV, and you know, all of those issues. So it can be a lot of work.
So you think you really become more like the hospitality industry?
Oh yeah, it's definitely it's definitely the hospitality industry. So
what else do you think you tell them not to do?
So all right, so not to do. Don't put your grandma's favorite quilt or bed or whatever else. You need to understand that the furniture you put in this house is going to get damaged. Number 2, big don't get emotionally attached to what people say about your house, because I see that over and over and over and over again. I tell people short-term rentals are easy on your pocketbooks, hard on your emotions. 3, I would actually encourage you not to clean the place yourself. Certainly if you're an investor. And the reason why is, if we have an owner who lives close by and they walk into the house after someone's left, even if they're not a bad guest, the place looks a wreck, right? It's all, and they have a sense of, my house is destroyed. 3.5, 4 hours later, after the cleaning crew's gone through, it looks way better than the day you moved in. So again, I would encourage you not to clean it yourself. Make sure you understand what your local regulations are, permits are, lodging and occupancy taxes. All of those things can get to be a big pain. And then don't overcomplicate the technology in your house, because if you do, that'll just be one more thing that you have to continually deal with.
So
And don't, on your pricing, don't price how Airbnb tells you to price, because Airbnb has a perverse incentive, which is only each of the platforms. Their only incentive is to make sure that the price on their platform is lower than it is on any other platform where it might be advertised. So you have this perverse race to the bottom in pricing. And so routinely when we take over other people's short-term rentals, we'll increase their rates at least, we'll increase the revenue at least, close to 30%, sometimes 50-60%, just because they were running off of Airbnb's pricing, which just throttles the price down.
So you work off of VRBO, Airbnb, bring them together, and what other sites do you integrate with?
So we're Airbnb, VRBO, of course our own site, Booking.com, TripAdvisor, Expedia, and then there's a platform called Rentals United that pushes out across a whole host of more niche, 20, 40 different niche kind of sites.
And so not only are you doing kind of the housing environment, but you're also doing kind of like glamping sites. So what do you think about glamping?
Yeah, I think it's great. We've kind of branched out from just traditional single-family homes. We've bought 2 mobile home parks that we were converting into tiny home communities, and then we bought some other larger properties where, to supplement the revenue, we've put glamping sites on them, because your tents are marginal cost, and as long as you're upfront with people about what amenities there are or are not, you're okay. And so we got inspired by an Airbnb that one of our employees went and stayed in, and it was a glamping site, and literally in the title it said, "High maintenance people don't come." And it was a great tent out in the woods. They had a porta potty, no running water, like it was very rustic. And it booked out for $250 a night, and was booked basically the whole summer. And so, their cost basis was somewhere, furniture, tent, and all around probably $9,000-$10,000. And in a given month in the summer, clearing $3,500 pretty easily. And so paying back their whole investment in the course of a summer, and then making just additional marginal on the out month.
So what do you think about experiences? Adding that to the short-term rental.
It's great if you're managing. If you're a hyper local, we are not a hyper local company. It's like when Ray Kroc met with a bunch of MBA students one time, and he said, any one of you could go home and make a hamburger better than I could. So then why do I have this multi-billion-dollar organization? It's like, because I make a fairly standard hamburger over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. So that's why we're very proud. We say we're the Walmart short-term rentals. If you are running your own short-term rental or just a couple, then sure, you can add all sorts of wraparound services, experiences, get groceries for them, all of those sorts of things, and you can add some additional revenue. At our scale, it's just too complicated to try to piece all of those things together.
And it becomes problematic. I mean, from a service perspective, I think you can make more work for yourself and actually reduce your rating scales. Because that's one of the things I've really known, like on VRBO. How do you get to that premium, host and the things you need to do? And so, what are some of the key things that you try to do to maximize your focus on high quality?
Yeah. So again, I would say we're Walmart. So so other people who will, the amount of money you have to spend to take yourself from a 4.7 or 4.8 up to 4.9 or 5.0 is dramatic, and you don't always get the same returns. So again, to speak completely candidly, sometimes our lower rated properties perform better than our higher rated properties. Why would that be? So let's take Huntsville, which is one of our markets. Let's say you want to take your kids down to Huntsville to go see the Space Museum, and you're going to go on book an Airbnb, and you probably book a month, 6 weeks, somewhere like that in advance. You're going to book the 5-star, or 4.9-star properties, right? But what that does is that blocks up the calendar with a bunch of small, choppy weekend bookings, and then it's hard to drive people in during the weekdays. Our Walmart properties, and even within our portfolio, so some of our properties are reviewed lower, don't get those weekend bookings. But then when a group of plumbers or electricians or some work crew shows up for 6 weeks, our house is the only game in town. And then we keep our prices exactly where they were, and those lower performing properties paradoxically end up, lower reviewed properties paradoxically end up generating higher revenue.
So like
But-
the 4.3,
Oh yeah,
4.5
oh yeah. I've got-
versus the 4.8.
I have $80,000 houses that have 4.1, 4.2s, and will make $4,000 a month. Month
I
over
like
month.
that.
And so that's where so if we were just a management company, right? If you're just a management company, you don't want to manage the $80,000 property that makes $4,000 a month, because that property is a lot of headache. And you don't, as a management company, derive any benefit from the fact that you have a low cost basis in the asset itself. Versus if you're a management company, you want to manage the $1 million beach home that generates $120,000 a year in revenue, right? Because you're just taking a split off of the revenue. The cost basis, the asset doesn't matter anything to you. And so that's where we're a little bit different again. We're willing to say, we've put in place systems with low overheads, to where we can go out and manage and help people who haven't just bought this house as their vacation home. Because the other thing is, if it's your vacation home and that's the reason you bought it, then any money you make off of it is more than you would have gotten otherwise. Versus if you're purely an investor-focused owner, then you may never go to the property. Like the vast majority of our owners literally never go visit any of their properties. We source them, renovate them, furnish them, manage them, and then just kind of take the cash flow off of them. So that's where we're a little bit different. But if what you are is wanting to manage a premium property, the key things to keep your reviews are, number one, cleanliness. And that is the biggest challenge that a company like ours has at scale, is managing cleaners. Second thing is that matters a whole lot is your amenities. So do you want to, instead of buying swab bottles, are you going to buy kind of higher end soap, shampoo, towels, sheets? All of those things will help drive your pricing up. And then three, and just as equally as important, is a personal touch, right? We feel like we've gotten pretty good at the narrative that we show to guests, that even though they're staying in a home that's one of the hundreds that we manage, they feel like it's a very personal experience, because we get our local property managers very engaged. They leave a note. They're the ones they reach out to. And so we try to still give that personal touch, but our property manager in Birmingham is managing 40 plus properties, versus if it's you managing an apartment in your basement or a house down the street, and you've only got one or two. If you meet the guest, you let them into the home. The higher touch you go. So if you're managing your own and you want the lowest cost way to make sure you really get great reviews, make sure the place is clean, give them a little bit nicer amenities, and then the biggest thing is be very personable and kind of in person.
So, what do you think is the best strategy for 2022 with short-term rentals?
Volume. I mean, this is a volume game. I mean, all of the data you look at any given time, 20+% of the people who are staying with us are first-time users of short-term rentals, and they plan to come back, and that transcends both the vacation category and the workforce housing category. Hotels hate short-term rentals, right? It is really, I mean, and all of the regulations you see, on the face, it is community groups and all this, and there is that piece of it, but in every instance, it is the hotel lobbies that are funding the efforts, because they are getting crushed by the short-term rentals. Again, everything from your extended stay Americas that are losing out on workforce housing because now they've realized much better to stay in a house and share, all the way to the kind of vacation end of things. So it's a volume-based business, and that's and in terms of the types of properties that succeed most, pretty simple. Anything that's unique. So if you're in a tight real estate market and you're trying to think, how can I get a comparative advantage? Well, Blackstone is not buying geodesic dome houses or octagon houses or TPs or like what you have to find something. So why do we go buy bankrupt timeshare properties now? Because nobody's out buying bankrupt timeshare properties. Everybody's out buying single. So one is find something that's a little weird or quirky that they may not want to live in. Another thing we tell people, like on a busy highway, great for us, right? Because it's actually less concerned with neighbors, next to a parking lot, next to a hospital, next to some other commercial facility. Again, less attractive for long-term renters or certainly home buyers, makes no difference to the short-term crowd. Then the other types of properties that do really well are large homes in urban cores, because the comparative advantage that you're fighting against with hotels is just volume. So if you can get proximity to the downtown area and a larger, more doors, more bedrooms, then that's only increasing your comparative advantage over a hotel. And then the last thing is small multifamily. Small multifamily is our most profitable stuff by far, because let's say you've got a quadplex, 2 1s, all 4 of the quadplex. You don't actually have 4 2 1s. You have 4 2 1s, 2 4 2s, 1 6 3, and a 2 1, and 1 8 4. And so by doing that, you can raise the rates approximately 30 to 35% for each of the individual listings, because you're touching multiple different points on the demand curve and allowing yourself to keep your occupancy about where it was, even with the higher rate. So really, the secret to being successful at scale the way we do it is to have a lot of nerve with pricing. And what I mean by that is most people, when they look at our revenue managers are literally forbidden from looking at the calendar going forward. Every other revenue manager you'll look at, they will only look at their forward-looking calendar. I love it if we have no bookings for 8 weeks. Perfect, right? Because then when the work crew shows up, again, we're the only game in town. And so what happens is people get panicking because they have no bookings on. What I hate to see is like no bookings 2 weeks later, like a 3-day booking. That's what I hate to see. That's what annoys me. So our revenue managers only looking back. So if we haven't met our occupancy targets over the past 30, 60, 90 days, that's when they start dropping the pricing. But the difficulty if you're managing for owners is, again, this is why any owners that we bring on board, we say, look, if you want to manage your Airbnb, manage your Airbnb. If you want us to manage your Airbnb, for the love of God, don't manage your Airbnb, right? Like, don't touch it, don't look at the reviews, don't look at the pricing, don't look at the calendar. If you're unhappy with the check you get each month, then let's talk about that. But don't get involved, because what happens every single time is they'll come and banging down the door, drop the prices, drop the prices, drop the prices. I don't have enough bookings. So.
Yeah. Well, it's all about return on investment.
Correct, right.
We've been kind of exploring it on our farm. We have a little tiny home and we're doing a farmcation. And so we have a cleaning person, but before the next guest comes, I do a spot check, just because I want to make sure that everything is perfect.
Correct.
And it takes me 10 minutes to do that.
Right.
And I give a tour of the farm and they love it. And,
oh, yeah.
And then I'll sell a whole bunch more pork.
Oh yeah. So you're a perfect example of the antithesis to us, right? Like you're hyper local, you live on site, you can provide that premium experience, not just in terms of like the actual quality of the real estate, but the quality of the experience.
Right.
And that's, so where we come in and help sometimes people like you.
Yeah, which is what I'm gonna do
is with the pricing, right?
In the scheduling, and because I don't want to deal with the people, I just want to have them show up, make sure they have a great experience, and I don't have to do with the rest.
So we have two management packages. One that's the full service package where you just get your check every month, and the other one is for people who are very involved on the ground. We say, look, let us run the pricing, we'll run the marketing, the advertising, we'll do all the guest communication and engagement prior to arrival, but then from the time they hit the ground, they're yours, and we'll pick them back up after they leave. And that allows us to actually work with property management companies, so long-term property management companies, say, look, you got a great ground game with maintenance, and like our strength is on the digital side. We learn to do the on-the-ground operations purely out of necessity. So we've got several really successful relationships with long-term property management companies to kind of allow them to offer a different flavor of things for their owners. And the other thing it allows them to do is go after nicer homes, right? Like you cap out in what you can cash flow on a long-term rental.
Right.
So if I've got a second, I'll walk through how we think about rental arbitrage. So in one of our markets, I could go and pay $1,000 a month in rent for a property when I'm doing an arbitrage model, and I might turn around and make $3,500 to $3,700 a month on that property. So I've got about $2,700 delta. I can go pay $2,600 a month for a really nice large home in the urban core, and I'll make $10,000 or $11,000 a month as a short-term rental on that. So then my delta is $7,500, $8,000 a month versus the $2,500 or so a month that it was. So in the analogy I give to that is for people who want to go after nicer properties that have more appreciation potential because they're more desirable to home buyers and stuff, but worry about their ability to cash flow in the short term. Short-term rentals is a way to kind of bridge that gap.
Well, like for example, lakefront properties. People don't always live there. Maybe they've left, but they don't really want to sell it. I mean, that's an ideal environment for something like that.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I mean, again, your most successful properties, large homes in urban cores, anything that's kind of, funky, trendy, unique, small multifamily, and those are going to be your top three performers.
Great. Any words of wisdom that you'd like to leave with everybody?
I don't think so. I mean, I think that, again, I'll just come back to if you want to do short-term rentals, recognize easy on the pocketbook, hard on the emotions.
Yeah.
This is not, it is the opposite of a passive, at least if you're the one managing it, it's the opposite of passive income.
And it's the hospitality industry.
It is.
And that's the biggest thing that I think, I came from the hospitality industry before, so I understand it, but most investors don't get that.
Right.
And it's a very, very different model.
Yes.
Very different.
Yes. Your upfront, and just so you know, if you're going to get into short-term rentals, your upfront costs are going to be a lot higher because you're going to have to do a little bit more on the finishings, and then the big thing is the furniture, linens, all the soap, shampoo. So it's about 20 grand, even with bulk. We send transfer trucks out to hotels that are going out of business, and we just take everything they've got. We've got a partnership with Disney. We take a lot of the stuff that's coming out of Disney. So we work a lot with liquidators. Even with that, 20 grand to get a house set up and furnished. Used to be a lot cheaper. When we started this even a couple years ago, 10, 12 grand, get it done. All of our material, mattresses, linens, one of our employees literally got in basically a fist fight at the Port of Savannah today over a trailer full of, over a container full of linens. And there's bidding wars going on at the port over the linens. So we paid $15,000 more than we had originally agreed to pay for this container of linens to get them because there's just supply chain shortages.
Yeah.
We've got to have them. We had an investor that we had to deploy an extra $25 million for in the last couple months of the year. And we've got to get it all set up, furnished, and in service so you can take the tax benefits out of it. So, you know, cost becomes relative. So.
Yeah. Well, I think we've learned a lot today. Does anybody have any questions for Joe?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a lot of doors and a lot of check-ins. What's how do you manage the keys, or do you have a system for that, or what's?
So we are always experimenting. We have everything from some of our older legacy houses just have everything has a digital lock. More of the legacy ones have the kind of dummy locks. They're not smart locks. We are now running 3 different smart locks through trials at about 30 doors each to kind of see how they perform. And the good news, and the good thing with these is they then integrate with our property management software in the back. And so the code that the guest gets is the last 4 digits of their phone number. So they put that in, and it auto rolls the lock for each reservation.
That's smart.
That system is, you know, it is expensive itself, and it's difficult to kind of get fully onboarded. We have smart thermostats are huge, you know, because we pay for the utilities. So getting smart thermostats that are also hooked up. So that's another service we offer to our owners, is we can get them the smart thermostats at the cost we pay for them, and then pay them a subscription fee to manage and maintain that. Because, you know, guests all the time go out of the house, leave it on 58 in the summer and 75 in the winter, and then the cleaners come in and they're like, well, "This is comfortable. This is how I'm going to clean." You know? They leave, and they leave on Sunday, and it's Thursday's the next check-in, and Sunday through Thursday you just pumped out the window. You know, so then these smart thermostats allow us. We've got a person on our team who goes through every to double check the software, who goes through every single house in the portfolio every day and shuts off, adjusts up and down, whatever the thermostats are, and the utility savings that generates are massive.
Probably more than a salary. For
Oh
sure.
yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Particularly, we have a lot of old historic homes too. You know, so kind of 1800s homes and stuff like that, which are beautiful. But those things, you know, you can have a $900 utility bill in no time.
Well, hey, this has been a great Let's Chat. I hope you guys have learned a lot, and we're wishing everybody a great holiday, and we'll get this going after the first of the year. Thanks so much.
Thank you.